Hey everyone, welcome to the Underswell. I'm Derek Sabori. Thanks for being here. There we go. Okay, good. All right. David, we're live. How you doing?
Awesome. I'm good. Good to see you, Derek. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm excited. I'm stoked to have you on the show. We've got great conversation lined up. And I love the work that you're doing, and it's been fun to watch you do it all. But before we dive in, give me a little sense of what have you been up to? Where are you at? Where are you calling in from? And what have you been up to personally?
Yeah, I'm just at home here in Ventura. My wife and I live up here. Just been on the road a bit the last 4 weeks for work, mixed a little personal in. We were over at the GFA, the Global Fashion Summit in Europe, and then spent some time with some brands in that part of the world. And then just made our way home this past weekend. Thankfully, got one fun day of surf because I was like kind of 3 weeks out of the water. So that was a nice reprieve to come home. The water's a little warmer and a little bit of marine layer relief, although that seems to be hanging around. But yeah, good to be back in California.
Yeah, I like that. Does your wife travel with you did she go with you on that trip to Copenhagen?
Normally, no. We both travel a lot for work, but luckily this time it lined up. She had a workshop for work the same week in Copenhagen, so was able to join. And yeah, that was fun for me because usually work is work and it's always a grind, but we did get to have some personal time in between, which is nice.
That's really nice. I loved when I was doing a lot of work with Volcom as their head of sustainability, a lot of opportunities to work with subsidiaries and licensees. And when Kering acquired us going to France and Paris, and I would always kind of tack on opportunities for the family to join me or meet up with me in certain areas. And that's always nice when you can do that, kind of combine the two.
Yeah, especially in summer, like getting to make the most of it. So, but yeah, happy to be back in California. Obviously, we got a lot to focus on work-wise, but yeah, this time of year, just trying to get some balance and doing some activities outside and surfing when we get waves and conditions and just keeping it simple.
Well, you're in the business of being outdoors and surfing, skate background. All of this has been tied into your business, and I know your personal passion. So we're gonna dive into that. But I'm here with you, David Stover, CEO, co-founder at Bureo Inc. Today, I want to talk with you really about your career, which I know has been led by purpose and has been, as you call it, an imperfect journey from Chile to global supply chains, from fishing net waste to recycled apparel, which you were out in Copenhagen at the Global Fashion Agenda Summit for. But we'll talk about that imperfect journey. But I do like to always mention how my guests and I connected, because I really think it often illustrates the power of connections and all of us just getting out there, doing things, being in places. But you and I first connected, I think it was in Cornwall, right? At the
the Global Wave Conference.
The Global Wave Conference. And that was 10 years ago, I looked, which is, man, does it feel like 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. A lot comes back to that conference. Like, obviously, we met there and have kept in touch. I think the people that have been involved in that movement, especially like from a surfing side and conservation side, that was kind of, I feel like, the real start of that momentum that's definitely carried through from in our world for the last 10 years. So yeah, obviously that event has a lot of meaning to me, and there's a lot of history and roots and relationships that we put back to that.
I agree. And it was really nice, that gathering, kind of being in Cornwall, a place that I wouldn't have necessarily expected to travel to, a small southwestern part of England, great beach community, great surf spot, but just kind of have, that collection of all the players and people doing really interesting work, advocates, pro athletes. There's a lot of people there, and I agree that was a feel-good moment, feeling like, hey, there's a lot that can happen and that is happening. And before I let you jump in on that, I want to ask though, so you were at the event in Copenhagen. So I want to know, if you look back at that 2015 event and we say, hey, that was impactful, but how has the conversation changed today? If you look back to the Global Wave Conference of 2015 and the summit that you were just at, have things changed, evolved, getting better, same conversations? What's your perspective on it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd have the perspective kind of from where we sit personally and as the company of what's happened out there, but then trying to step back and look at what's happened in the broader conversation. Even if we look at that, let's call it 2010 to 2015, because really leading up to that event, personally for me, I feel like that was my awakening to what was happening with the environment. And, even at the time, just the stuff I was reading and interested in as a surfer and wanting to think about things differently was, learning about the problem of plastic pollution. I think Charles Moore wrote his book Plastic Ocean around that time. Personally, I was reading, there was a kind of pretty famous article now, Creating Shared Value by Michael Porter, HBR, that was talking about just this idea of social businesses. So for me, like that period of 2010, 2015 was really the start of thinking about like this social impact movement, really the time that I became interested in plastic pollution going into the ocean. And I think if you look over the last 10 years, certainly the awareness and the amount of funding and organizations and companies focused on that, I think has grown tremendously.
Sure.
Like the amount of ambition and courage and people that are making a career of this to solve this problem is there. Now on the actual like metrics of like moving the needle, I think we've started to move the needle. But at the end of the day, the industry is making more virgin plastic every year. So from like a climate and environmental perspective, you could very much make the argument that we're in some ways in a worse off place today than we were 10 years ago. And I think broadly as an industry and as a kind of global economy, that is likely the case, right? We look at what is now happening with climate and some of the issues geopolitically that obviously have put some of the environmental issues on the back burner. Those are all big concerns. But like going back to that event in 2015, I think that community for me that really started there around ocean conservation and this movement for kind of creating and building a better world has gained momentum. And I'm really optimistic about like what that community can do going forward into the future.
Yeah, if you look back, I mean, it felt like maybe a small community back then, but to your point, it has evolved, it's growing, more numbers, more people show up. So many of these conferences now are so big and there's so many aspects to them as well. I mean, whether you're tackling, plastic pollution or, climate issues or biodiversity impacts or hazardous chemicals or fair labor, right? It's just like this ecosystem of things that we need to be focused on, and you're kind of right in the middle of it now.
Yeah, I mean, we've had such an interesting perspective. We started as a niche skateboard company in 2015. Like we were showing little cruiser decks that we were making in Chile from 100% fishing nets.
Yeah.
And 10 years later, our business has obviously evolved, and the things that we're focused on is very much still rooted in keeping plastic out of the ocean and having a solution for that. But we've definitely started to play a bigger role in trying to help companies make more responsible products and really going after a much bigger problem, which is, hey, the world is making more and more new plastic every year, and we need to stop doing that. So, 2015, we had this small, out of the garage idea that was, very much like a small industry that we were looking at participating in. Now kind of really working and interested in like the systematic change of like something as big as the apparel industry. Like how do we get them to move towards or help support move towards more responsible production in a way that has a meaningful impact on both our ocean, so helping to keep more waste out of our ocean. By the way, that would include clothing waste in addition to fishing net waste now, because that is an issue.
Yeah.
And then on the environmental side and the impact side, reducing their impact from an emissions standpoint, reducing their impact from a water standpoint. And so I feel like our mission has really evolved into a much bigger, more responsibility than we had, 10 years ago when we were looking at skateboards.
Well, that's for sure. And it's really interesting to hear you kind of say, thinking back to kind of a small garage startup, you were probably not thinking of systems change and really being, an impact player in the entire industry. So what a change, if you will. I mean, you just kind of gave us a little snapshot of it, but give me a little history of how did you guys find each other, your co-founder, the idea? Can we wrap it up? What's sort of the story of how Bureo started and kind of the current state of affairs then today for those that don't know about your history and what the company does?
Yeah, I mean, it was that 2011, 2012 timeframe. I was really fortunate to, have two really close friends, Ben Kneppers, who I was living with in Australia, and then Kevin Ahern, who I went to university with. We studied engineering together at Lehigh in another lifetime, many lifetimes ago. We graduated in 2007, and we both had kind of gone different ways with our career, but at that moment in time, none of us had families. We were all kind of, I'd say, disjointed a bit with these corporate type roles, which I was in myself, jumping from engineering school into consulting. And I think the simple thing is we were all looking for purpose in work. And I had identified that of like wanting to do something that we cared about, that was meaningful. I think I mentioned before, I was really interested in looking into this issue of plastic pollution. I grew up around the ocean and have spent a lot of time in the ocean. It's something that's kind of near and dear to me. And I think Ben and Kevin shared that interest. So it was kind of this time in our life where we had the time and space to think about these things and just started ideating around what we could do. Actually, some of that started with surf because I had worked on a fin design research project in school, and we had some contacts in that space and really started ideating around what like a recycled surf fin would look like. Okay. And then that eventually became the recycled skateboard through, Ben had been ideating with some of his friends on that and had spent some time in South America. And long story short, we came together with this business plan about a year later, 2012, heading into 2013, that would basically set up infrastructure to collect back fishing nets in Chile and build skateboards locally. So pressing cruiser decks out of that waste, and very much like a, B2C consumer plan of like, we're going to launch a company, we're going to market the product, and we're going to go to retail. And that's really where this idea started transforming where we are today. Eventually, not to say that everything has to have failures, but I think some of the lessons learned there were that just this idea of collecting waste and supporting people and protecting our ocean and coastal environment, that idea obviously had a lot more traction than everyone needing a skateboard. And so, quickly we realized that our purpose and kind of like what we were likely there to do was to find a way to collect this material and process it and put it back into supply chains. Luckily, even before I think we realized that, Patagonia had taken notice of what we were doing in Chile and reached out in 2014, and that started what's now become more than a decade relationship of looking at development of recycled material for the apparel supply chain. And that really catapulted our business model more from, looking to market and sell skateboards, which was really fun. And honestly, like we've got stories for days about what that was like trying to get off the ground and on a shoestring, basically.
Yeah.
And like we still have fun today, but our challenges are much bigger and different, kind of working more in this constrained apparel system as opposed to trying to like build a brand and get people off. So yeah, I know that's a lot, but that's kind of the journey from skateboards into the apparel sector.
Yeah, and no, I appreciate that. You did a great job because I know there's probably so many micro stories in there that you could branch off into. And I guess so it's really interesting that Patagonia then the prompt. I was wondering if there was like if the marketplace changed for the skateboards or if Patagonia came knocking and you're like, oh, I guess we should put some attention over here. How did you guys know and decide to say, yeah, that's where our attention needs to go? Because that's a big pivot. That's a big shift.
I think in that first year that we were living in Chile, which would have been the first year of the company, I'd say we got lucky dozens of times, but 3 of those times really ended up being significant events. One of them would be just a cold email from Patagonia. I think someone had picked up an article on the skateboards we were making and had sent it to someone in Ventura at headquarters and said, hey, we should take a look at these guys. They're recycling fishing nets and making products. Definitely wanted to give some credit to Jack Johnson and his foundation. They had a concert in Chile in our first year that we just started looking at boards, and we were invited by Save the Waves, who we had become friends with on the ground in Chile, to basically, demo the board, show the board at his show, and help volunteer for their organization, which was doing beach cleanups throughout Chile. And at one point during that, Jack came over and saw the board and stood on it and rode it, and then eventually bought a bunch of boards for his foundation in Hawaii, brought us to Hawaii to tell kids the story. And so like, it was just one of those, moments in time where you just had to be there, and like, it was luck for us to get that exposure. And I certainly think that opened up, people to what we were doing in Chile, because we didn't have a marketing budget. We weren't running digital advertising. We weren't sending newsletters at that time. Like, we were just working on a problem.
Wow.
And like, I think it's a good lesson learned, is like, you take those opportunities and make sure that like you make the most of them. And for us, like, that opportunity from Patagonia was making sure that we did everything we can to help get this project off the ground, and leveraging those moments and trying to take it to the next point has really been something that, we've been focused on.
What I hear, though, and can imagine, is you call it luck, but it sounds like you kind of created that luck in one way, but you were ready for it. You had built out the supply chain, you had a product that was working, like, you were ready to go. So when Jack comes and says, "Hey, this is great," you had already done all the hard work. It wasn't just sort of an idea, because you can pitch ideas all day long. It's like, "Wow, these are great. Can I have some? Take it, show it, help build your story." And when Patagonia came, they were probably excited about the fact that, again, not just an idea or this concept, like, you had built out your supply chain. You were collecting, processing, doing the work. It was, in some ways a turnkey solution for them to build upon. Of course, took 10 years, you said, but right, you had done the hard work.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I mean, like, ideas are great, and like, we still like ideating and coming up with things, but like, putting it down on paper and then turning that into action is definitely where, it's where the rubber meets the road. And oftentimes, like, those are where you run into those challenges, but timing as well. Like, just the fact that we became interested in recycled materials in that time frame from 2010, 2015, I think there was a big shift happening there. I think feel very fortunate that like we came across that and decided to take that leap at the time, because it was in the early days where there wasn't as much maybe noise or through technology now where things get lost. Like, it was kind of a smaller hemisphere where like it would be realistic for us, because we were doing something out of the ordinary with fishing nets, to come across the radar of people that would be interested in that, like a Patagonia.
Yeah.
And so that part, I definitely feel very fortunate. And at the same time, I think timing is something we think about right now, in the current day, because there has been so much focus on alternative materials and more responsible production over the last 10 years. But we also are concerned that the timing is not happening fast enough now, right? And that's something that we're pushing on. Is we've been able to make progress and grow with our partners, but the industry and certainly the way that the world is producing materials, it is clear that not enough is happening on a global sense quickly enough right now, both certainly on the impact that products have, and even on the issue that we're focused on, plastic pollution. That we need to be a part of this acceleration of that impact now.
Yeah. So in some ways, the journey is just beginning. You guys still have a lot of work, it sounds like, to do, but really exciting. I know you also were on How I Built This with Guy Raz, right? You guys did a mini segment.
We were like the end of
the little end segment, which is still, hey, again, another great opportunity. But I love how he always asks, and did you get the question though? So would you call it luck? Was it luck or, expertise? So it's a little bit of a blend of both, maybe. Did you get that question from him?
Yeah, we did. And that was like, I think that podcast might have been 9 years ago at this point.
Wow.
We were only selling skateboards at that point. Yeah. Maybe it was 8 years ago. So yeah, it would be interesting for me to go back and just listen to what our answers were and what played out from that. But yeah, I think that obviously like being studied and putting in the work, another thing we've learned is like getting credit for the action as opposed to just, putting out a press release or talking about these big impacts you're going to have without anything to show. Like, I think we really learned that from the close partners that we had, that credibility is really earned. And like, we still fight that because there's always an instinct of like, when you have a good idea or a project before it's happening, to talk about it. That it is really important to show that it's possible and something that you intend to do, not just something that you're trying to get some sort of credit for because you feel like you have to say that.
Right.
And we see that now, certainly in the apparel industry. It's something that we're pretty critical on. There's a lot of big claims by the industry as a whole. Whereas like, we'd like to see more action from that crew. We're fortunate to have very great partners. In addition to Patagonia, obviously, we have partnerships with Outerknown and Finisterre and other really responsible companies that are looking to hit their commitments and goals. And we're really fortunate to partner with them, but really looking for that pressure to be taken to the broader industry.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll do it. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm interested in this, David. I know, in the intro, I referred to you saying it's been an imperfect journey. So maybe it has to do with what you've just been saying, but why would you describe the journey as imperfect?
Yeah, I mean, I will call out, I think you said it, like, the journey continues. Like, in no point for us, even in, getting into 11, 12 years now, has it ever felt like that journey's over. It's always like on to like, what's the next part of this, which is a challenge, but also it makes it enjoyable, right? Like, we're all engineers, and solving problems is effectively what a business is. Like, you need to be ready for things to go wrong. In a way, the reason that we serve a purpose is because there's a problem and someone needs to solve it. So that's job security in a way too. But the imperfection is that, I'm sure there's stories where you have one founder and some tech solution, and it's this rocket ship where everything goes right. I don't buy into all of that for kind of systematic change, and certainly on like tangible impact, because I know like it takes a team. So like, certainly even in our leadership group, none of that work is possible without our entire team. And I know that like, I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for Ben and Kevin at the co-founder list, and then the rest of our team that have all played a part. And the imperfect side on the journey is that like, the real reality going from the stages we've gone through, everything, we were not immune to the global pandemic. So like, having your business cut off and roads shut down due to protests and ports shut down. I mean, we've seen from a supply chain side, even this year, but certainly over the last 5 years, the number of disruptions, both in the US, in South America, and certainly in Asia, where we do a lot of work now, the number of disruptions from geopolitical decisions, from global pandemics, from social unrest. It's been pretty remarkable to kind of watch that and how that ripples through and impacts, everything from someone showing up to work or being able to get to work, to products being on a boat and having to get somewhere, to a pricing model being completely disrupted overnight by something that was relatively unexpected. So that's the imperfect side, is like, these little fires, and sometimes big fires, at this point should just be expected. Yeah. Like, especially when you're going down somewhat of an unknown road, it just becomes a matter of like, trying to anticipate what the next challenge is going to be, and then certainly like problem solving once that happens. Which I think, to your point, is just like you said, it's become expected. It's also probably just the norm when you're creating a business as an entrepreneur. Things are always going to happen. I knew you had an engineering background. I don't think I realized your other co-founders are also engineers, which is cool. So you guys are in the business of solving problems, like you said. So I want to talk about that. Just, you just alluded to how your engineering degree might have helped you along the way. I also love, if I look all the way back, David, if I look at your LinkedIn bio, I love that your career seems to have started at a surf and skate shop. Was this always the hope that you'd be working in this space? I think you've been in the ocean, around the ocean as a surfer. Is this where you saw yourself? I mean, honestly, it's like kind of funny to look full circle, because none of that was, there wasn't intention behind that where I started. And like, it was a real interest. Like, when I was in high school, I grew up in a really small town off the coast of Rhode Island. And certainly the outdoor life was just ingrained in that. So surfing was a part of that. But like, biking and running and swimming and playing sports and playing ice hockey in the wintertime. We just loved everything about the outdoors. And so there was a lot related to that led to just a love for doing things in the outdoors. And one of the kind of members of that community, his family, his name's Jim Ortel and his wife's Marion Ortel. They had an independent family-owned sporting goods shop, that sold running shoes and surfboards and sunglasses and apparel, anything that you would need to go for a run or enjoy the outdoors. Mm-hmm. That shop is actually still in business today, and it's been family-owned since 1989.
Oh, that's cool.
Which is pretty cool. But that was my job through high school and college, and, was involved on a seasonal basis in the buying. And so I went to trade shows. I went to OR and Surf Expo and saw that side of kind of the apparel and the action sports industry early on. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I didn't look at it as a career while I was doing it. I really enjoyed it. Got to know the products, including Patagonia, who was one of the companies that we sold there, as well as Costa Sunglasses, who we work with now.
Funny.
And then kind of went on to engineering school. And then when we started Bureo, that's when that first started to go back, because we actually sold our skateboards in that shop. And that was really cool
Were they your first account outside of your direct to customer?
I think they were definitely one of our first accounts.
That's cool.
Yeah. Which was really cool to send them invoices, because they used to, give me paychecks in high school.
Yeah. I want to know why you said you didn't see it as a career, and I think that's interesting. Looking back, can you think as to why you didn't necessarily see a career there? Was it just because it felt too fun, or it wasn't big enough, or combine that answer with why you decided to go to engineering school?
Yeah, I think part of the reason I went to engineering school is because the Jim Ortel, who owned the shop, was an electrical engineer, and I think we always had great in retail and wholesale. We end up just talking to people.
Yeah.
And that was probably the biggest lesson I learned there, was just learning to communicate with customers and understand their needs. But as a boss, I would spend a lot of time talking to Jim, who was really into, he was an Ironman athlete too. So kind of an incredible guy, but he had a lot of influence on me, and very much trying to figure out what I wanted to do in high school. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I knew what I was interested in. And so I think that very much shaped my career of why I went into engineering school. But like everyone else, and I'm sure there's kids in high school and college now, you just think, okay, I go to school and then I get a job. And so when I was in college, I definitely wasn't thinking much about getting back into that world. It was, I need to get a job after I get out of school. And so that's how I got into consulting. It's funny, I did take one stab. I had an opportunity to apply for an internship with FCS in Australia.
Okay.
When I was getting out of engineering school, but it was at that time it was unpaid and required me to move to Australia. So that was not an option, unfortunately.
Back in the day of unpaid internships for a surf fin company, and you didn't take it. I take it.
I didn't take it. No.
But you did end up getting a job, what seemed like probably a really exceptional job at EY. How do you go from being a consultant at one of the big 6 firms? That feels like, hey, you're locked into a career pathway. How do you decide to do you get an entrepreneurial itch and you're just like, I got to get out of here and go do this?
Yeah, there was a lot of things happening that particular year. I think I was 24, 25. So early on, I accepted that job right out of school. So it was even 6 months before I graduated, I knew I was moving. The job was in California, so I was moving to Los Angeles. I'd never been to California, but it sounded like the right thing to do. And so I just jumped, 2 feet in, and I was taking some finance classes at UCLA on the side because I had an engineering degree, and I jumped into a finance job. Mm. So that was just interesting. It was just interesting to learn something I didn't know much about.
Yeah.
And I was honestly pretty burned out after 2 years, and had told my boss that, the corporate grind might not be for me. And they said there was an opening in Australia. And I said, well, if I can get paid and move to Australia, I'll do it. And so that's really was what kept me hanging on to that. And I got to see a lot of interesting things, like the in and outs of companies and through mergers and acquisitions and other sort of issues. But that movement to Australia eventually moved me into an apartment with Ben, Kneppers, who's a co-founder. And the awakening was that wanting to find meaning and purpose in work. I really was interested in some of the things I was working on, but at the end of the day, sitting there like, how are we making the world a better place? What is our purpose? I lost a really close friend that same year that, I grew up with, who I surfed with and was a friend of ours. And like that perspective of like being with someone one day and then losing them the next day also had that like awakening of like, wow, this is like, maybe our time here is shorter than I thought. I need to think about how I'm spending that. And like that's definitely been a theme that, I've carried through and thought about a lot.
Wow. I can't, that's, I didn't know that part. So that, I'm sorry to hear that. And that'll have a big impact on your life and get you headed in a new direction. I wonder, if you look back at what you guys have built so far, and I want to switch over here and start to get some advice from you for those that are kind of coming up behind us and moving into their careers. But as you've built and evolved Bureo, what's been the best part about it? The hardest part, the scariest part? Building a company is no easy task, and you guys have been successful. What's been the best and hardest part about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think like looking back, like definitely the people that we've gotten to work with, on our team, people that we've gotten to hire, and the companies that we've worked with, just learning a lot, like from the companies and the leaders you mentioned before, but we've gotten to work with some really remarkable companies that like we've taken a lot from to learn about doing business differently, using business to solve problems or at least limiting impact, has been something that's really great. And then just like the camaraderie of like teamwork. It's like, as you work through these challenges, you also like build relationships, to me that are really rewarding and has been like a really big part of what we're doing. And it's just like also taking on the responsibility of like now wanting to have the conviction of this being a bigger solution and really going after bigger changes. And like, in no way have we hit like the cruise control where we're just set, like our team is always scrappy and fighting, and like we're on to the next big challenge, which is really this bigger system change that's happening in the apparel industry.
Yeah. Regarding the apparel industry, just one, what do you, and this will be my last question before the break here, but how do you feel about the industry at this point? You've alluded to it a little bit, but I guess, did it feel like there was a break-in period? What was it? How was it like coming into the space? Do you feel like you had Patagonia behind you? Obviously you've made inroads, but I guess I'm not sure what I'm asking here. If it's like, was it hard to break in? Do you feel like you're all the way in? And what overall, you've said we're not doing enough fast enough. So I don't know. One last thought on the apparel industry.
I think I didn't realize like how complex the supply chains are in that place. Yeah. And, how opaque that it was historically, like the more we learn from companies, that some of them still today that we talk to don't even know where the materials come from that go into their products, has been like eye-opening. And so it's just been an education journey for us. I feel like we're still just learning how things work. And we've learned a lot to know how we can take our material from, fisheries in South America and process it in a way that fits into that supply chain and then follow it all the way through a final product. And that part has been like very cool to watch and to like see our products out in the wild, or to think that like, Kelly's getting like a sick wave at backdoor on a pair of trunks that came from fishing nets in Chile is pretty wild. Yeah. That part is awesome. Then the bigger challenges is like, going beyond the amazing partners we have. How do we convince the players that are having the real impact on climate and the real impact on keeping plastic production going, and really get them a part of this systematic change? And that's the challenges that we're working through now, where it's like eye-opening to think about, you hear a company, we did 1,000 tons of nets for a single apparel program last year. So to give some perspective, that's like 80 shipping containers, right? And our total program collected close to, 2,000 tons of nets through all of our networks. So that's our scale. Wow. And then you hear about a single apparel company that their total like fiber program is like 600,000 tons. I mean, mega big. Yeah. It's like the numbers it's just hard to fathom, but it's also very motivating, right? It's like, okay, this is overwhelming, but we're motivated to try to be a part of this, part of the change.
That's a big part of it, is the scaling part, right? Because you're right now working with the sustainability champions who are like, well, yeah, this is just how we do things. Patagonia, Finisterre, and Outer Known. But like, how do we get Gap, to switch over? How do we get H&M and Uniqlo and everybody else in those huge volumes to adopt and use your materials? That's the opportunity on the table. Well, David, let's take a quick break. I want to come back and get some advice from you for people who are on their career journeys. So stick with me and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the episode. I'm always so inspired and motivated by these career stories, and I hope you are too. And I wonder, are you looking to be featured on the show? Each week, I chat with an invited guest who is an expert in their space or who has compiled a stellar resume. If you fit that description and are interested in being a guest, just hit me up at Derek Sabori on LinkedIn. And here's something else to consider. This show platform is for hire. I build professional and personal podcast profiles for people who are looking to stand out in a crowded marketplace. You've heard my guests say it's your personality, the way you connect with people, and your ability to relate and communicate that will help land that next job, client, or customer. So let's show off your personality, not just your resume, and let's do it on a podcast. Head over to theunderswell.com to learn more. And now back to the show. David, we're back. Right before the break, I was asking about sustainability in the apparel industry. You've been working with Patagonia and Outer Known for years. I guess, has it been fun? You mentioned it's been cool and fun, but how important are brands like that in this space and companies who are kind of coming in with a purpose and that's the only way they're doing business?
I mean, we just need brands with conviction. Like, I think that they play such a vital role to be on this leading edge. And certainly Patagonia has been on the leading edge for decades. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, as I said before, like, you can talk about something for weeks or months or years that may never happen, but to go out and like do the work and say, this is why we're doing the right thing. This is not the easy path. We're going to basically lead by example. And if you do that well, which I think a lot of brands that we work with are doing that well, you create this economic incentive as well, right? It's not just, oh, they're doing that because they're this sustainable company. Well, it's like, if you're successful at doing that and you're sending a signal to the market that, hey, the consumers are reacting to this. I mean, that's one thing that I'm pushing for, is like, consumers reward brands that do the right thing. And that has the impact of other brands seeing that and saying, like, oh, we have to do that now. Right. Because if we don't do that, which I hope this plays out for anyone that, thinks that, they can just keep business as usual. Don't worry about our energy inputs. Don't worry about the material input. We can have an impact with our product. We're not a sustainability company. At the end of the day, if the market is shifting and rewarding companies that are doing the right thing, then we should start seeing that as a risk for businesses to keep that going. And I think that's when we'll start seeing the system change a lot more. And we're starting to see those examples, right? I mean, we're starting to see companies, feel the urge and the need to do that. Mm-hmm. I am worried that there's a lot of focus in apparel right now that regulation needs to solve the problem. I think we need regulation to help shape how to make responsible products and what can go into those products. But I think the brand has a lot of power if they stand up and are committed and show the conviction. The consumers listen to the brand. So if the brand tells them why this is the right thing to do, I think they'll gain a lot of respect. And I think that turns into brand equity. And we've seen that in the market. We would like to see more players in that space kind of understand that dynamic and not have to wait for a law to tell them why they shouldn't be making something that's not good for the planet, Right.
And we know that laws change, they come in hot, then they're backed off of. So there's like multiple levers, I think, to it. It's like brand responsibility, get the consumer involved, of course, some regulation, but regulation also takes years and years. Brands can act quicker and consumers can act even quicker than that, saying, you know what, today I'm going to buy something different and I'm going to choose a different brand. So you're right.
Yeah. And I challenged a brand actually at the last summit we were at, because they, during a public speech, said, well, we've asked our consumer and if they could pay for this sustainable product at a higher price, they would always choose the same product at a lower price. And I challenged the brand that said that after the talk, because I said, I mean, as a brand, like you're marketing to these consumers and gaining respect. So if you only give them one choice and you show them why you're making the right choice, you don't give them that option.
Right.
You know, like the brand wants to buy your brand, you know, whether it's, you know, in surfing or in fashion, they want to buy your brand because they respect your brand, because you're cool, because they like the logo, whatever the reason is, they want to buy that brand. But sure, if you give them an option to buy the same product and one is just cheaper than the other, and you're saying that it costs a little bit more to do the right thing, then maybe most consumers would intend to buy the lower priced one. That's their reality. But if you show them why it costs a little bit more and why you only make that product at that price, and it's a reasonable enough gap, then to me, you'll garner more respect, and potentially that's a business model that you can expand.
Which means we also need to get the entire industry moving together, because even if that one brand says, you know what, you're right, we're going to commit, we're offering one product, we've elevated our price, but if a competitor is like, suckers, we're going to keep ours down here, similar product, but at this price, but it's not made the same way, the consumer's like, hang on here, you know, so we got to get everybody moving and kind of elevate everybody, get the tide rising for all the boats, if you will.
Yep. But we need those outliers. We need those companies that are committed and have the conviction to do it now. And I think that's very much who we're close to. But yeah, excited just to be working on that problem and try to be a part of the solutions for the bigger players.
Yeah. Well, David, what advice do you have for someone who's looking to launch a product or a company like you guys did, but doing it today? What does it take? And what do people need to know who are sort of getting into the entrepreneurial space, just getting into their careers or coming out of school? Package it all up, if you will. Kind of what do you got for people?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like persistence, you know, like have an idea of, you know, where you want to go and why you're doing it, but you got to be persistent. You got to be expecting things to go wrong. You know, we talk a lot about strategic urgency, and that's like not being urgent in a way that you're making a lot of mistakes or making maybe irresponsible decisions. But strategic urgency, you know, is that you're thinking about things and acting quickly and being able to make changes that are required. Because you will need to make changes. Like the world it's a fast moving place. And if we've learned anything, you got to expect that things are going to change. Mm-hmm. You know, and on the advice side for younger people, I mean, I definitely would advise like to figure out what you're passionate about, you know, what makes you wake up, and hopefully you can find a way to weave that into your career. And, you know, selfishly, I would ask, is that making the world a better place? You know, I think we need more of that right now. Yeah. And if the next generation can tie those two things together, like something that, you know, has a benefit, a social benefit, maybe for kids or in healthcare, or obviously in the environment, for whether that's some form of consulting or recycling, whatever you're doing. If you can tie a passion that you have to something that the world needs as a solution, I think that is the type of things that you should be thinking about. And
get paid for it. Then we're at the magic trifecta, right? That's the Ikigai approach, I think.
Yeah, well, there's Alan Watts's What If Money Was No Option? So I don't know if anyone's in college, you can listen. That's not everyone's path, right? You can't just be the poor artist. You need to have clients. But it is like a thought-provoking exercise to think about, like, if you weren't worried about the money, where would this career take you? Yeah. And then think about what options you do have to explore that passion. You know?
Do you, I guess I want to, you know, you've already mentioned, I think, a bit of the lessons that you've learned, maybe the mistakes or things that have happened. But when you look back, are there some big lessons that you've learned? Is it some of those just sort of, you know, being ready to change, be resilient and persistent, keeping up? But what are the biggest lessons? What are your takeaways from your career so far that, you know, you'll pass on to younger people?
Yeah, I think being able to adapt and change. I'll send you the article, Derek, but I was just reading an article that some of our friends put out. Really interesting. It actually followed like the coli bacteria and looking at like its like feedback loop of looking for things that it needs to eat to sustain. And it was just like this parallel between like nature and actually technology, and thinking about like just the simplest thing has a way to like go into a feedback loop and think about how they need to change before they move forward. That's definitely something, like looking back, like being able to change and being nimble enough and not being like stuck in your ways because you have to change. I think a big lesson for us just at Bureo and for me is like finding a way to be it's really difficult to be even keel sometimes and like take the bad and the good in more of like a level way. But like it is a bit of a roller coaster. And so if you get too excited when things go right, you might not be prepared for when inevitably they'll go wrong. And if you get too down, every little thing that goes wrong, you may not be in a position to be able to benefit from the positives. And like, I think it's like maybe to a fault, and my wife would probably say this too, is like you do lose some emotion in that respect because you're just expecting things to go wrong on a business sense anyway.
Yeah.
But it's pretty key to like be able to try to keep a level head. And honestly, it's hard sometimes, right? It's hard to do that when there's multiple fires burning maybe at a time. And maybe it's hard to tone it back when so many good things are happening, but it's kind of the reality of the journey, at least of a young company or a startup, is that things are going to go well, that you're going to be over the moon about, but you should expect that some things are going to be challenging right after that.
Yeah, that's really great. And I just wrote down kind of stay the course. I see as you had mentioned when you guys were building, whether it was COVID, disrupted supply chains and protests, whatever it is, you've just got to kind of stay the course. I love that. And I haven't heard anybody put it that way in terms of just sort of staying level headed, stay within that bandwidth of like, regardless, good or bad, stay right in the middle and just keep plugging forward. That's a good one.
Yeah. And I don't think it's always has to be these crazy pivots either. It's more like, I'll maybe even for surfing, right? It's more of like a micro adjustment you're making, or like a small change that's keeping you in like the right spot, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, sometimes maybe it does make sense to do a complete pivot, but I would argue even from building skateboards in a garage to helping to support apparel companies, like we've been on a similar trajectory, even though those things are completely different. That trajectory has just been nudged by different forces, but we've still been focused on preventing pollution and having a positive impact with products. It's that change and adaptation that you take along that course, as opposed to like, this isn't working, we gotta throw everything out and start over. Like if you started with a conviction to do something, it's likely that is your purpose or related to your purpose. And so finding a way to like tap into that and make sure that you're evolving for the future is kind of like what you need to do.
That's great. Yeah, you're sort of sticking with the surfing analogy. You're still riding the same wave, just maybe at a different part, or maybe you're still surfing the same spot, but just on a different wave. How about that?
I think that's a great analogy.
Well, I'll give you, David, I like to give this to my guests, just sort of an open soapbox, if you will. Give you an opportunity, anything we left out, anything you want to add. It's your mic for a shout out, a call out, something you're stoked on, something you're down on, or any last bits of advice. I'll kind of leave it with you to close us out.
Yeah, I mean, a shout out I would just give to our team because, I'm speaking on behalf of them, but certainly all the things we're talking about is from a whole group of people from, more than 20 people at our facility in Chile processing nets to our kind of management team here. So just to our whole team that has been behind us the last decade, of course. All the great partners we have, many of which, Derek, and have mentioned, really thankful for the support for the material. And yeah, like a message, I guess, to consumers of like, I'm sure that there's a lot of feeling, and there's a lot of feeling on my side too, that, there's a lot of dark things happening in the world that are hard to change. And like, keeping some positivity and hope is a real big part of that. And like, hopefully looking at the way that they're allocating their dollars and putting it behind brands and companies, not just for apparel, but everything you're consuming that are a part of that change that we need going forward. And I do think that we hold, on an individual level, we hold a lot of influence and power that moves into our communities, into our networks, into these companies that can have bigger change. And so, yeah, that brings me hope that we have that, and just encourage everyone to, be positive and keep moving on.
I love that. I love ending with some positivity and a bright outlook. David, thanks for the work that you guys have done for the last 10, 15 years. Thank you for your effort. And just this idea, I'm just such a fan of companies doing business better. You're a part of that movement. You're helping to drive that change. So thanks for that. Keep doing what you're doing. And I appreciate you being here and sharing some of your story with us.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I'll see you at the next conference.
Yeah.
All right. Take care. Hey, everyone. Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what you heard, be sure to check back weekly, subscribe to the show, and if you want to be featured on the show, come hit us up at theunderswell.com. We'd love to hear from you.